Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event. My name is Sophia Fangay, and I'm your host for today's very exciting discussion. So I'm first pleased to say that I'm honored to be in the company of three Black African women powerhouses this evening. First, Afua Tun Danso Imo, who will be reading a passage from the book at the center of tonight's discussion. The book, as many of you will know, is titled, But Where Are You Really From? We will then be followed by Amanda Knozi Mukwashi and Naana Otoo-oyortey, who will be discussing the concept of the Black Sisterhood and finding joy within it based on the ideas explored in Amanda's book. So the book touches on many important issues, including issues around identity, faith, belonging, as well as womanhood and sisterhood. And if you haven't already picked up your copy, please make sure you do so. It's available for purchase online through most reputable bookshops, but also you can get it directly from the publisher at a discounted price of £4.99 with the offer code BUTWHERE2, the letter 2, until Monday, 5th October. And we'll repeat that information for you at the end of today's event. So the idea of the Black Sisterhood, which I guess is the unspoken bond and solidarity between Black women, especially in a world that is so hostile to our gendered and racialized bodies, is, I would argue, the sweet calm in a very violent storm. And with the world that we live in, filled with so much pain, so much suffering, and the continued denigration of Black people, and especially Black women, as we have only too clearly witnessed this year alone, with the disproportionate number of COVID deaths and having to risk our lives in the middle of a pandemic to convince the whole world that our lives matter. In light of all of this, it's easy to be despondent and only understand your Black existence through these limited frames. Which is why it's so important to also focus on, prioritize, and embrace the idea of Black joy, which hopefully we will have a chance to discuss and interrogate more fully in today's session. So as part of today's program, we'll first kick off with a key message from Sarah Head, who's the Senior Marketing Exec at the publisher for the book, SPCK Publishing. We will then get a reading from the book by Afua, and she'll be reading from a chapter which explores many of some of these key ideas about the Black Sisterhood. We'll then, after that, move on to our main event with Amanda in conversation with Naana to discuss the main themes of today's event, drawing from the book itself. After that, there will then be the opportunity for all of you to ask questions, which we encourage you to put into the chat box if you have anything really burning that you'd like to ask and discuss, please feel free to do so. And then after which time we will wrap up today's event. So without further ado, I'll first hand over to Sarah to give us a word from the publisher. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're thrilled that you could be here. Yeah, I am the Senior Marketing Executive at SPCK, as Sophie said. And Amanda's book with us has been a bit of a whirlwind journey compared to several of our books, which I've taken a much longer process from beginning to end. Amanda's journey with us has been sort of quicker than that, but it's also felt very providential. When the book was first introduced to us and proposed at our internal meetings, we all think there was just a feeling throughout the entire publisher that this was such an amazing opportunity and such an amazing book. It was a story that needed to be heard, and reading Amanda's words, I think everyone, speak for all my colleagues here, I think when we say we have all been very much affected by them, and it's been an honour and a privilege to be able to work with Amanda on this book that is just such an incredible testament to an amazing woman and the things she's accomplished, but also to our culture, the wider world that we find ourselves in. It's informative, it's educational, it's provocative, and we are so thrilled that it sits within the SPCK list and are just so honoured to be working on it with her, and we hope that it will go far and that you will all love it as much as we do. So that's about all I'm going to say. I think that pretty much covers everything. I'll keep it short and sweet and hand over to Afua, who is a longtime friend of Amanda's, to read directly from the book itself so you can hear those words and their power.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to be reading from chapter 11, which is entitled The Black Sisterhood. Aside remembering that the trees know my name, discovering Black sisters that share some of my experiences in the UK has been invaluable in making this country my home. We all need sisters to stand with in solidarity and role models to help pave the way. Who are your role models? It's a question I get asked a lot. And every time I feel the sense of expectation that I will mention the popular names such as Mother Teresa, Eleanor Roosevelt, Maya Angelou, Harriet Tubman, or Sojourner Truth. Of course, these women are extraordinary. They achieved a great deal and helped change the course of history. When I'm asked that question, though, the very first people I think of are the women that I have seen and related to most of my life. Women like my mother, my mbuya, my aunties. Women who have left a lasting impression on me, transferring their knowledge and values to me at the most formative times in my life. What I learned from them can never compare to any inspiration I get from people that I read of in literature. Those characters simply complement or reaffirm the foundation upon which I stand. I want it to be acceptable to mention those closest to you as the people who have shaped and inspired you. From my mother and Mbuya, I took strength for granted. I saw entrepreneurship in action. My mother owned and ran a bus for public transport to pay school fees. She taught women how to grow oyster mushrooms in their spare rooms. She made and continues to make peanut butter and has a garden that is always flourishing. She inherited a strong sense of identity and personhood. My mother was widowed at a tender age of 24 years old. She refused to remarry any man who would not accept her children and their place in her life. My mother is a brave and courageous woman, no ordinary individual. She's the woman who gave birth to me, cared for me, struggled for me, and continues to carry the cross of motherhood, which means that she will always worry about my well-being, irrespective of where I am, what I do, or what I achieve. She, like other women who had a similar heritage, whose stories will never be told, is a mosaic of stories, knowledge, and leadership. As I talked to friends about this heritage, I saw a common and shared thread in values. In speaking to a friend of mine in Zambia, his mother was Ndebele, he told me, I have always been proud of my heritage. Why? My mom represented everything a kid needs to grow up and be progressive. For instance, her values on hard work, initiative, foresight, and faith. The older I grow, especially beyond 50, the more I think of her contribution to my life. It's because of her, despite her low education, that I learnt my math by selling food to people who worked in downtown Lusaka. From the caravan and her chicken sales, our family home was acquired. From there, her kalambula sales ensured she never had to depend on anyone until her death. Her raw faith in God sustained her in the best and worst times. As I spoke to other friends, I further discovered that many of my peers with Zimbabwean heritage seem to share the same narrative and experience regarding the values of their parents. I think it's something we have taken for granted, something that needs to be recognized and appreciated. This was a generation who were uprooted, found themselves in a foreign land, and yet preserved what was good and wholesome of their own culture, and were able to pass it on and instill it in their progeny. They were extraordinary people. On my journey of discovery, I have met other and different African women of all ages, and they have given me a piece of themselves unreservedly, because that is what African women do. They share with you a bit of themselves so that you know they have walked a similar path and they have survived. While they may not all have been of the same value base as my mother and others of her kind, they were nevertheless the custodians and bearers of pieces of knowledge, ideals, and values that were important in my evolution as a woman, as an African woman, and as a Black African woman.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Afua. That was really, really really beautiful, and I think touched on many of the ideas which hopefully Amanda and Naana will also be discussing further. So before I hand over to Amanda and Naana for today's main event, I just want to give you a very brief bio on my two African sisters. So Naana is a self-described African socialist who, when she isn't giving TEDx talks, is also the executive director of the Foundation for Women's Health, Research and Development, otherwise known as Forward. So Naana will be in discussion with Amanda, the author of today's book, and with the new accolade of book author now added to her list of achievements. Amanda is also the CEO of Christian Aid, an international development organization based here in the UK. And Amanda has well over 20 years worth of experience in the sector, working to alleviate poverty, inequality, and injustice. And so without further ado, I will hand over to you now, Naana. Oh, Naana, you're on mute.
Thank you very much, Sophie. It's a real pleasure to be part of this, I would say, amazing event. And Amanda, thank you so much for also reaching out to me. Firstly, I'd like to say congrats. On really doing an amazing job. I mean, we need to always say congratulations and we need to always celebrate. And I really, really appreciate even reading the book. And I think just from what we heard from how Afua spoke, you say we all need sisters to stand with in solidarity. And I think in terms of writing this book, who were the sisters who inspired you to really take this bold step to write this book?
Thank you. Hi, good evening, everyone. And Naana, thank you very much for that. And thank you for accepting to be in conversation with me this evening. I think that, how do I answer that question? I think there were so many different sisters who touched me in different ways during my journey. I think it would be easy for me to say I wrote this book in 6 months or in 2 weeks or in 3, but actually it didn't happen like that. I think I've been writing different types of books in my head for the last 15, 20 years at least. I've got so many notebooks that are sitting somewhere in the house with unfinished stories. But this particular book, this particular story, I have to say that people like Afua, people like Mbozi who read the book, who did the reading last time, my sister Mercy, and a few others have been so instrumental in me writing this particular book, because there were frustrations that I was going through and that were in my heart and in my mind that I wanted to express. And these are the people that I discussed issues with. And then there were people who encouraged me and said, you know what, Amanda, just sit down and start writing. You know, I remember Mbozi saying, just write whatever you think of, just write, put it down, sit down, get your laptop and write. And it will make sense in the end. And yeah, and those are the people who've propped me up along the way, so.
It's very interesting, the book, as I show it here, but where are you really from? It's something that speaks to all of us and our sisters in the diaspora. I mean, it's something that, as you say, we are repeatedly asked and really having to justify why we are here. It's really interesting how sisters have been so important in this journey in justifying why we are here. And so you really talked about writing this book, and you really talked about, you know, it having been not just a 6-month thing, but a real journey, and it taken a long time. In terms of writing, we know it's also hard, and being the head of an organization, it's really not easy. But what kept you going? But most importantly, you know, how did you get the insights, again, to do the research? A lot of it comes out, but it would be really interesting to get some of these nuggets and why you found these nuggets so beautiful.
Yes, yeah, I think 2 big questions that you're asking there, Naana, and sort of just reflecting back. I think the first one really about, you know, being in my position, having a really busy job, and then being able to write. First, I think I came to Christian Aid in early 2018. I think, early 2018. And since then, I've had to lead the organization on a massive change program that has seen the organization reduce its geographical footprint from working in over 40 countries to working now in just under 30 countries. And that has taken its toll. And I have to say that, it's been very tough. It's taken my time. But also, we're now under with the COVID-19 pandemic. It has meant that, you get really, really busy. And on top of that, I think like Sophie said, we then have the whole issue of racial injustice coming up. And so I think in writing the book, it was my escape. It was the place where I could go to where I was not being judged. It was a place where I could go to and reconnect with my grandparents, reconnect with their story, reconnect with my mom, who is, I don't have relatives in the UK, and apart from my family, my husband and my children. And so it was a place where I could reconnect with the strong values that I stand for, that have made me me. And so the two pieces, I think, in terms of the research, that I said to you that I've been writing this book for a long time. And the way my mind works is that I need to make sure that in my head, the story is written first. So I wrote the story from start to finish in my head. And then there was something that happened, I think, in 2016. My grandmother died. She was in her 90s. Sorry. And she was such an important, I think when you read the book, you realize just how important she was in my life. But it made it very clear to me that, all the people with the knowledge of the migration, because they were migrants, they migrated from Zimbabwe to Zambia. And everything that they knew, that age group was dying out. And my sister and I started talking about this. And I said, I want to know more. And so when I looked, I started researching, talking to my mother. She helped me. I would ask her to talk to some of the elderly that were remaining in her community. And then I was talking to others who also had the similar heritage from me. And slowly I started putting this down. I have my phone, and sometimes I would be typing in the little sort of Word document and just typing, sending emails to myself about nice things that I heard. And eventually I sat down one August last year, and I was on 3 weeks off, and I just sat down every single day writing everything that was in my head, everything that was in my heart. And I didn't censor it. I just wrote it, and I thought it would be censored afterwards. So if anybody wants to write and you're like me, just put everything that you think you want to talk about, because that's what I did.
Thank you so much. And I mean, what I found really interesting were also, the proverbs and things that really takes me back to Africa. And how we say things in flowery language. I really loved it. Mm-hmm. But I really love the Black sisterhood part, because for me, you share your experience of sisterhood, an experience of Black sisterings, as we will say, who have been there for you. And really what comes out a lot is the strength, the resilience, the hand holding that is really necessary as you walk in another country where we now call home. And I think these are things that really come out in the story. And I think talking about the work that we do as, Black African women leaders in this country, there is so much disconnect into this whole issue of sisterhood, because people don't realize how we have had this hand holding to get us here. And it would be really good to really share some of your insights around this sisterhood, from the Black sisterhood in UK, and how that has actually, because I think you say something, in one of your books about Gladys, who gave you, this, she gave you a message, and it really came back years later, and how that also opened a new life for you. So really would love you to share a little bit about those insights.
Thanks, and I'm sure that Nana, it would be great if you also could share your own experience, because I know that this is an area that you have a lot of experience in. But before you come in, the story of Gladys is an interesting one for me, because Gladys she's a real person. She's still alive. She's in Zambia, and she is, I remember when we went to the Beijing World Conference on Women 1995, Gladys was one of those women that we looked up to. She was the women's rights activist in Zambia. And so I got to know her, and she became a family friend. She's older than me, so in our tradition, in our culture, she's somebody that I would not call Gladys. I would probably refer to her as sis or auntie. But when she heard that I was coming to the UK, she then said to me, things are going to get tough when you get to the UK. And when you're all alone, don't think that you're alone. There's this organization called Akina Mama wa Africa, okay? And she said, look for them and find them, and somebody there will help you. It's a group of Black sisters. And I took it, she wrote it somewhere for me. I took it, I came here, and I didn't really think much about it until the time when I stood and I felt I was alone, and I reached out to them. And a woman called Mary Kanu. I don't know if you remember Mary Kanu. I don't know where she is. I've not been able.
Yes.
I wish I could.
She went back to Nigeria.
She did, yes. She called me from nowhere. I had left a phone number, and she said, "Are you Amanda?" I said, "Yes, I'm Mary Kanu from Akina Mama Africa. Would you like to come on a training course?" And at the time, I couldn't even afford a train ticket from Coventry to Birmingham. And she said, "Don't worry, we'll buy your ticket for you," or, and so on. This is where I met Afua, actually. And it's a small example, but I look around and I think when you come to a place like the UK, for a lot of Black women, especially Black women our age, when technology was not as advanced, right? Where we got to know each other through word of mouth, right? The Black sisterhood became, for me, the place of, it became a sanctuary, right? It became a place where I went to know what to do, how to navigate the space. I remember meeting, I was working for Saba Women's Center at the time, and I remember meeting an African-American friend of mine. I think she's online, actually, Therese. And I remember her coming in, and again, when she shared her experience of the US, she reached out. So at every single stage, Nana, for me, I have found that there's a single narrative that I don't like, which is that, Black women do not support each other, or somehow we pull each other down. And I think that's just one narrative, it might have some truth, but it's very little truth, or it's truth from one perspective. My experience is that for every woman that pulls others down, there are 100,000 that are reaching out to help you and to support you. And I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more, because, I was talking to my daughter earlier on today, and she was saying that for her generation, she's 25, for her generation, the Black sisterhood has become so critical, but technology has really made it easier for them to reach out to each other. So where the mainstream media only showed the failures of the Black sisterhood, social media has celebrated our successes and our achievements. And so there are more of us that young people can look to and share with. But, I don't know if your experience is different from mine, and I would love for you to also share your own experience in this space.
I think it's really interesting talking about, being able to actually share our stories. And if you always look through, you'll find so many similar stories of our challenges, but also our successes. And, you know, that hand of, you know, sisterhood and friendship that holds out to you at a time when just out of nowhere. And I just recall a few of those examples for me, and where that has helped me in my journey in terms of my work in different places. And I think for me, one that stands out particularly was when I finished my master's, and I had nowhere to live at the time. And I had a friend who said, come and stay with me. And that friend was an African sister. And very often you would have to pay to, you know, go and live with people. But she took me and my children, my 2 kids. And that was, for me, an example of sisterhood in time of need. And as we look back in terms of our work, we've actually seen the role of mentors and some of our sisters who have actually shown the way. And if I look at Forward and how Forward started, I mean, Effa Dokenu showed us the way. Nobody was prepared to talk about FGM. That was the time when Effa said, let me talk about these issues. Let's work with other African sisters. And I recall, you know, listening to an African sister sharing her story. And that then made me think, gosh, it could have been me. But at the same time, I had so much support. And right now in Forward, one of our real interesting work, it's about leadership and really us helping and holding out to other young women so that they could also walk the journey that we have walked, but also take over from us. Because one of the things that I'm seeing about critical leadership is that sisterhood that we need to reach out and support. And you're finding, like you said about your daughter, her issues and needs are different, but at the same time, there are certain experiences that we continue to experience here as Black sisters. The challenge of reaching to these high level positions. And so it's so important to share our learning, to tell our stories, and to let people know that there is a sisterhood. One of the things I really find interesting is even the whole issue of resilience. You know, we go up and down and challenges, and you've mentioned quite a few of these challenges in your book. But I think sisterhood is so essential for our self-care. I mean, at time of COVID, you can imagine reaching out to our sisters when we are in isolation and lockdown has been so central. And I would like to really ask you about what you do in terms of self-care and resilience, and how your sisters have really helped you, you know, in this critical moment.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good that you're talking about resilience and especially during the time of COVID. But if I can, I think one of the reasons in my book that I talks about intergenerational, so I go from different generations, is because if you work in our sector, in international development and humanitarian, what you see when you hear about resilience is an African woman with a baby on her back, some firewood on her head, water on her, you know, it's almost like this image of an African woman as a beast of burden, right? And yet that's not how I see the resilience in terms of African women, Black women in countries like the UK, and I'm sure in other parts of Europe and the US as well. What I see for me when I hear resilience, I see resilience in the values that sustain us against the odds. Okay, in my book, I describe the African woman as the world. I say, to me, she is the world, because when you look at the issues of racial injustice, when you look at the hierarchy of who is more important, right? Starting with the proverbial, you know, white middle class male, the one that sits right at that bottom of that is the Black African woman.
Yeah.
Right. So everything has been thrown our way. Everything that you can think of has been thrown our way. And yet we are a very spiritual people. And yet we still find time to laugh. We are there for each other. For me personally, my personal experience, even over the last 6-7 months during COVID, it is, when I go to my prayer groups, my group of 3-4 women, these are Black African women or Black women who are praying for me and interceding for me. If I'm struggling with something at work and I need support from somebody, I go to another Black sister who's actually walked that journey before me, where I can say, sis, can you give me some of your examples? What do you do in situations like this? Some of the women who are, again, I think some of them are on the platform, have created she villages, the new sort of the she village. And you go in there and it's simply a space where you can be you. And I think it's really important for us in terms of our identity to be unapologetic about it, and I think that's why when I look at the young people, young Black women, when you think about the Black Lives Matter movement and protest, you look at all these young people and they're unapologetic of being Black. They're not trying, they're very clear in terms of what they accept and what they don't accept. And so in looking after ourselves, that is what, accepting ourselves and the beauty that we have is the first step, And for me, when I think about my well-being, it is about saying, you know what? Yes, I am a Black woman and I am an African Black woman. And you know what? I'm a woman of faith. And all those 3 identities, I love them. They make me who I am. So because I'm very free in my mind in terms of that, already I'm starting off in a very, very different place. And so, the women who I can pick up the phone at midnight and they'll answer it and tell me off for calling them at midnight, but they'll know that I wouldn't have done that if I didn't need them at that point. That is the power of the Black sisterhood, where, somebody picks up the phone and says, this young girl, you don't know her. I just happened to meet her. She needs mentoring. Can you be there for her? And I say, I'm really busy, but maybe I can talk to her one afternoon, and I make time on a Sunday afternoon. I talk to her. She asked me about how to get on in the sector and I talk to her. This is what Black sisters do in the diaspora in times of challenges. And I think that's what keeps us sane. That's what keeps us well. I don't know if I'm answering your question. I know I'm...
when you're just talking, I was just laughing a little bit because, when we came on, somebody said, did you talk about how you dressed? And you're all in the same attire. And I think that for me, it's about that sisterhood. It's quite interesting. We had an event, last year, and everybody came in purple. And they said, did you talk about how to dress before you all came in? And we said, that is that sisterhood, that bond that is really not spoken, but we know we have that bond. You don't have to be there all the time for her, but when you need her, she will be there for you. And I think that's really the values that we have as Black sisters. And I think that's something that we need to instill over and over again into our young people. So that issue of intergenerational, it's something that you just brought up. And I think I really love it. And as we continue to laugh, we continue to celebrate, we continue to be happy despite all these odds. Because at the end of the day, people go to, clubs to learn how to laugh. But we have it. We have it deep inside us. And I think that's the beauty of that Black sisterhood. One of the things I want to sort of bring out, and I think we do have a few minutes more to talk, it's about, our young people, intergenerational learning and sharing, and that Black sisterhood. And I think in one of our programs that we do on young women leaders, it's the beauty of having another Black sister to really mentor young people has been truly phenomenal. And for a lot of them, it was very much like, oh, I don't see any Black people in those positions. How do we bring these women to actually link up and create that kind of intergenerational learning and bonding? So for me, it's an advice on how we can do that better. Mentoring is so, so important in order to instill that spirit of being African, being clear of where we are coming from. We can be African, we can be British, we can be everything else, but that African still is in us. And how do we continue to build this mentoring support and kind of intergenerational learning that we need to sort of leave with our young people?
I think it's another one of those questions where there is no one single answer for me, but there are a number of tensions in there, right? I was talking earlier on that sometimes you look at how many Black women do you see in senior spaces, in very high senior spaces, and my answer would be not enough, right? And so you have on the one hand the fact that there's so many of us, highly skilled, loads of experience, and yet if there are 100 positions where and there are 1,000 of us, we can we're given one position to fight over, right? One position to fight over, and that I think sometimes then creates the tensions within our generation, but also tensions in terms of intergenerational, because we have been really limited, squeezed out. If I may say, it's like, somebody's holding our neck, right? That we can't actually be in that space. And so, we find ourselves fighting between ourselves for that single space. I think in terms of mentoring, in terms of creating, I think, having more people, more Black women in these spaces, I think we just need to either create the opportunities ourselves, because nobody's going to create them for us. And that's why I love the fact that, when I wear this head wrap, I only buy it from one woman. She's an African woman. She started this business, and I told myself and told her that I was committed to supporting her business. She's a small scale business person. There are so many young people, entrepreneurs, Black entrepreneurs. My daughter was talking to me about Black Girl Fest, and the fact that, she goes there, and now I buy my tights from a young woman who runs a business specializing in tights for black women. Because of course, when I go into Marks and Spencer's, or I go into the supermarkets or other shops, I can't find the colors for me or for people like me, right? So I think we need to create the opportunities for ourselves, right? And let's support our young people. A good friend once told me that somewhere in the world, a Black woman who is pregnant will probably be, go to give birth at a GP surgery that is run by a Black doctor. They'll probably go to a little shop that is run by a Black person to support them, not because they don't want to go to the mainstream, but to support them. We need to invest our support in our young people. So I think the thing with mentoring for me is that it has to go beyond just talking. It has to go just beyond talking. And we need to be able to take actions. Perhaps each one of us must make a commitment that I must help one young African woman in my lifetime. Just one. If every single one of us helped one, maybe we could get to some place. And for those of us like you, like me, who are sitting in these decision-making spaces, I belong to a network of women chief executives in their sector. In January, we had a meeting, a few of us, we had a meeting, and we started talking about how we can encourage young women to come up into positions of leadership. And when we were talking, the conversation was such that I asked the question. I said, ladies, I'm with you. I love being with you. But if what you're talking about is something that's going to benefit only white young women, then this is not the place for me. Okay? And I'm happy for us to agree what the remit and the scope is. And I'm also happy not to be in the space Okay.
Mhm.
But if we are really going to work on young women, then I would like to see this include young Black women. Because when are they going to get their break? When are they going to get their chance? The last thing that I want to say in terms of mentoring is that, as a chief exec, quite a number of people in my position will get executive coaches, right?
Mhm.
And there are a lot of highly qualified executive coaches out there. But there are times when I want to say, you know what, can I get a Black woman to be my executive coach? Because there are just certain things that I need help with. And sometimes it's very difficult to know where to find them. Okay, I need help to navigate this space of racial injustice. Because it's everywhere. And just because I'm in the position that I'm in doesn't mean that I no longer experience it, right? We continue to experience it and we continue to challenge it. And so we need other sisters to continuously be there for us so that it's manageable, right? So for me, there is upward mentoring, but there's also peer mentoring between yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
and I've also learned that, I can be mentored by a young person, somebody who is younger than me. And I have to say that, I have learned quite a lot of things for my daughter, because she'll tell me, Mom, things are different now. This is how I see the world. And I think one thing that I would share that sometimes gets in the way is that part of our values or our practices mean that there's this thing about hierarchy, about the older people, older generation. So when you're older and you're the auntie, maybe there are certain things that young people feel they can't say to you. I think we need to break those barriers and still in a respectful way, but ensure that our young people know that we can listen to them. We can not listen to them to help them, but listen to them for them to help us, right? It's a two-way street. So for me, mentorship is an all-rounded and very holistic thing.
Amanda, thank you so much for such an amazing conversation. I know that we would love to have continued this conversation, but I think some people want to ask questions. And I'd like to say thank you so much for the opportunity to really talk to you and to sort of hear your insights and to share some of my insights as well. So thank you very much. And as we say in Ghana, Ayuko for getting this done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, really. I think we'll hand over back to Sophie. I think Nana and I could talk for the rest of the evening, actually.
And we could listen to it as well, Amanda and Nana, and I think the conversation was so rich. It was really heartfelt. And I think the informal way in which the discussion was held, I think really resonated so much for many of the people who are online today. And I'm sure there are lots of virtual claps happening right now. So thank you so much for that discussion and sharing so much of yourselves. So we will now move on to the Q&A portion of the event. So if I can just remind you, for everybody who's online, our attendees, if you can post your questions in the chat box, we will try and take as many questions as possible in the time, but unfortunately, if we don't have sufficient time to answer all the questions, you can certainly send any questions, any remarks for Amanda and Nana to marketing@spck.org.uk, where hopefully we can pick up those questions for you. So in the interim, whilst I'm waiting for people to put their questions in the chat box, I thought that there were some really touching comments here, which you might like to hear, Amanda, as well. And the first is from Therese Weston, who's in Detroit, Michigan, who just referenced that you set an example of sisterhood for me and were a tremendous source of Christian support for me during my 3-year international work assignment. Our times together and the projects we worked on together are some of my fondest life memories. And I think that really speaks to the issues that you were talking about providing mentorship, providing that support, that solidarity, standing on the shoulders of other great women to be able to feel that success and that happiness. And lots as well of thanks and support in the comments for you, Amanda, for providing your perspectives and your voice. So I will, if I have the liberty of asking the first question, and especially to give people a few opportunities to, a few minutes to ask their questions in the chat box. Amanda, you mentioned and you talked about the different types of Black sisterhood that now exist, the intergenerational nature of it as well, and the different way in which it has formated when you look at, you know, how your daughter conceptualizes it versus how you have done, but how there are certainly commonalities within that. So I want to ask you if there was one specific lesson, I know that this is really difficult, one specific lesson that you've learned from your experiences in, you know, within the Black sisterhood, that you would share or pass down to your daughter, and thinking very much about what you mentioned about the different ways in which, you know, young Black women are organizing, the kinds of solidarity that they have now, especially on online platforms, etc. Is there a particular universal lesson that you think can be passed down to your daughter?
Yes. Wow. I think a couple of things. I think, first of all, let me just say one thing that I hope that I have passed on to her and I have told her, and that I hope she has embraced, is that never give up on the Black sisters, because by and large, they will never give up on you. Okay. You know, look for them, because when you meet with them, you don't have to start your story from scratch, you see. There are basic fundamentals about your experience as a Black woman, especially living in a country like the United Kingdom or in the US. There are basic fundamentals or experiences that are shared. So they understand you. Working on the wards, in the hospital wards of Coventry, in my first few years when I came to the UK, and seeing another Black African woman working there, young woman, you know, I knew immediately when I saw her, and, you know, asking her, you know, so what is your background? Would be the question that I would ask, you know, what is your background? And immediately she'd say, well, you know, I've got a master's in biochemistry, I've got this, because you knew that even if you were doing a cleaning job, that, you know, there was so much more to you, you know, in terms of your stories. Mm-hmm. And when she said to me, you know, I'm a biochemist, there was no need for me to say, so why are you working in the hospital as a cleaner, right? Because I knew, so we could start our conversations on the basis of shared experiences, right? So, and that serves to actually encourage you that you can continue to aspire on your journey. All the time, Sophie, when I was working in those type of jobs, right, I never thought for one moment that was my destination. You know, I knew that I was going somewhere else. I was destined somewhere else. And that was just a bus stop, if you will. And from a spiritual perspective, as a woman of faith, I knew that in every space and at every bus stop that I stopped, you know, I wanted God to show me what he wanted me to learn from that space, because I knew that there was something that I could learn from it that would make me a better and a stronger person, right? So that's one. Don't give up on the Black sisterhood. Don't believe the single narratives about who and what we are and what we can achieve, you know. And in a time, and one thing that I think I've learned from her and from her generation, Sophie, is that when you look at the Black Lives Matter protests and you look at the young people who were there, they have refused to accept the injustice that exists. In a way, sometimes I feel like our generation and maybe slightly older generation, and here I know that I'm generalizing, so it's not everybody, we somehow became complicit, you know, we gave up, we got exhausted with the fight. We got exhausted with the fight. And her generation has reminded us that, you can't get exhausted with the fight, right? You have to continue to challenge it and not accept it as the norm, because by accepting it, then what you're saying is you're accepting that we are lesser beings than our white counterparts. And the young generation has refused to accept that. And so what I've said and what I've given to her is that strength of belief, that strength of and pride in our own identity, our own values, our own lessons that we have learned along the way. I think that is really important. I think if our young Black women can know that they're not second-class citizens, that believe it, that I always say to her, you are wonderfully and beautifully made. And there is nobody that is better than you in terms of you as a human being. Your humanity is just as important as the next person. I think, Sophie, if we can leave that behind as a value and as a belief, then we know that even after we've gone, the fight will continue. And hopefully we'll get closer and closer to that ideal of a humanity that respects and dignifies everybody's life as important. I probably didn't answer your question, to be fair, Sophie. I just said what I wanted to say.
You definitely did, Amanda. And I think you provided more than one answer. I said just one specific nugget, but you provided, I think, quite a lot of universal truths, I think, that are intergenerational, that they still apply today, even though our struggle might look slightly different, especially for young Black women now living in the diaspora in particular. It might look different, but at its core, a lot of the same principles still apply. So I want to also just now highlight some of the other comments that have come in through the chat. Also just, we've got a comment here from Blessings Nyambura, who says to you, Amanda, she's listening in from Geneva, and you first met when you joined Christian Aid and attended the World Council of Churches Central Committee in 2018, and she had the joy of having dinner with you. She says, I agree, our mothers and women of their generation have been great role models and mentors. We must tell her stories for our children and grandchildren. Thank you very much for that, Blessings. And I think also there is another comment here from John Cornwall, who said, fabulous, thank you so much, Amanda. I've been a volunteer during your time at Skillshare, VSO and UNV. Very inspired by your journey and what you shared. We look forward to your book and share your wisdom with so many others. And I think, Amanda, this is so beautiful about the different stages of your life and the different parts of your career where people have met and your journeys have crossed, and the amazing feedback that you've received about how you've touched people's lives and the ways in which your presence and your goals, your vision has really been quite apparent and highlighted here. So if I have we do have one question online, which I want to ask you from Kileki. Sometimes mainstream societies see Black sisterhood as a threat or oddity. How do you deal with those who push back against that and try to take joy away?
Wow. Naana, do you want to go first? Is Naana still around?
I am still here, and I think it's quite interesting because we do know that people feel threatened by Black sisterhood, but the fact that somebody feels threatened by it doesn't mean that I feel threatened as well. As long as it does not lead to that preventing me from accessing opportunities and my rights, I don't feel threatened by these things, because I think the whole beauty of Black sisterhood is for us to be in line with our sisters. I mean, if you choose to be a sister, that's great. But if you choose to not be a sister, then that's a really unfortunate situation. And I think one of the things that we repeatedly have to really look at is sometimes you have to build that thick skin. And that thick skin is important for us to also survive. And that's really, I mean, Amanda, you were talking about resilience. And the issue about resilience is really being able to bounce back with these kinds of comments and really having that strong value that you have something to give. You have a purpose here, and that purpose is to make a difference to your sisters. Because at the end of the day, our sisters are so vulnerable and marginalized and continue to always be discriminated against. So our purpose is different. So if somebody says that that's not my purpose, well, I have a very strong purpose. And I think that's what I live by. And I think that's what I can say. And I hope you guys answer it. Amanda, you can add on to that.
Yes, let me add to what Nana is saying. I think if you had asked me this question some years back, Kekile, I would have probably, I think I felt that it was my duty to educate those that were feeling threatened and to put them at ease so that they would not feel threatened, so that they could accept us. And but that was some years back. I think now I'm in a place where I believe, you know what, if you are feeling threatened by the Black Sisterhood, then I think that you are in the wrong place mentally and spiritually. And I think you have to work on yourself. I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm not saying you're therefore against me. No, I just think that, you know, you then have to work on yourself rather than for me to bear to carry the burden of the fact that you feel threatened. And I think this has been quite we see this a lot when if you talk about young Black men that when they're walking the streets, people feel threatened. You know, and so what do you want them to do? You want them to dress differently. You want, they change themselves, they dress differently, they dress like the mainstream, and still they feel that they're threatened. And so the issue is not about me and my identity and the fact that, I've got a close network of sisterhood. The issue is, I think, self-introspection by the mainstream. I think we're still finding it difficult to have the conversation around Blackness. Even after the Black Lives Matter protests, in different spaces that I've been in over the last few months, people still want to talk about there's so many other issues that we have to deal with. There's so many other injustices in the world. We shouldn't just talk about the color of your skin. And I'm saying to them, actually, you find it easier to talk about all the other injustices, but you find it really difficult to talk about the color of my skin. And that's why we need to talk about it. And that's why we need to do something about it. But doing something about it means that you need to find your own relationship with racial injustice. You have to find, why is it that I am feeling threatened by a group of 3-4 people, or sisters, because they're Black women. And I've said this to my colleagues in the organization, outside the organization, and wherever I met them, that it's your duty to explore and interrogate your relationship with racial injustice, because we all have a relationship. What kind of relationship we have, is varied. But each one of us has a responsibility and a duty to interrogate that and then to deal with it. It might be passive, it might be proactive, reactive, whatever it is, but there is a relationship there with the issue of race. And I think that it shouldn't be my burden to bear that somebody else feels threatened by the strength of sisterhood. And so how we push back is, I think we push back with our own identity and our own space. We are not fighting. This is not a fight. There is room for everybody, and let's share the space. The challenge is not that I don't want to share the space, it's that the mainstream doesn't want to share the space with me. And like I said, something that my daughter said earlier on, and I wasn't going to quote her, but I know that she might say, well, you took those words from me. that when you look at the mainstream media, for example, it is the mainstream media has always or largely talk about our failures, our poverty, our suffering, our everything that is negative. That and so the image of a Black woman, and especially an African Black woman, is always about this aggressive, this poverty-stricken, and so on. And unfortunately, social media and our young people have challenged that. And so what we see when we go on social media is so many stories of successful, Black women all over of the world. The stories are beginning to be told, and I think that we need to feel the communication waves with the stories of successful Black women. I think it's really important, not just the big Serena Williams, but also the small entrepreneurs, but are still successful. I think we need to talk about them. And so Kekile, yeah, I think I would probably say it's not our job to push back. It's the mainstream's job to deal with their own fear of threat.
I think very well said, both of you. And it reminds me also of an event that was due to take place in Paris in France a few years ago, organized by Black feminists, and the absolute uproar that there was in Paris because it was supposed to be a Black woman only event. And in the ways in which obviously countries like France, there's no understanding or conceptualization of race, and how having closed spaces that are specifically for Black women, how that is seen to be a threat, that it's not something that is acceptable. You can't organize in that kind of way, etc. But I think you've highlighted all of the challenges about the real animalistic ways in which Black women are seen and understood, and how that threat is so so looming that it's so difficult to, you have to try and navigate that alongside your extreme femininity to try and make people feel at ease or comfort. But you're absolutely right, Amanda, that it's not for us to make people comfortable. It's for people to reckon with their own prejudices and their own feelings as to why that they harbor, as to why they respond and think about us like this. So I know that we are now actually we've run over time, but there is one very, very, very quick question that we have here, which hopefully you might be able to answer for us, Amanda and Nana, and then after that we will wrap up. It comes from Yvette, who also is at Forward, and she says, I like the point about older people learning from younger ones, as well as thinking of our background of children must be seen and not heard. How do you manage this change?
I think my response is a really brief one, Yvette, and it's from my own personal experience, and also I guess I think in my book I touch on I think the values that my grandparents had and my mother. We have to unlearn certain things. There are certain things that we also have to unlearn. And I think we need to be gracious about it, and it's the work that we have to do, and then relearn. So unlearn new things and new ways. It was okay for a certain generation not to be heard in terms of young people, but these days we educate. If we want our children to be confident, right? To be confident, to be able to be assertive, they have to learn it from the home. They have to start when they're young, when they're little, right? And who are they going to challenge, and who are they going to be assertive with in the home? It's going to be you, it's going to be us, the parents. And so we need to create that space that is conducive, where they can be assertive, they can be confident, and they can do so with the respect that still means that we're true to who we are. That way, when they're out there, that confidence and that assertiveness is already part of them. It's a skill that they have developed. It's a value they have acquired, and it's something that they feel comfortable to actually use with anybody that comes into their space. So that's what I would say, that we have to unlearn and then learn new ways of doing things. We can't remain the same because our times have changed, but the core of who we are in terms of our dignity and respect I think we should retain that. But dignity and respect is not just for older people. Dignity and respect is for all of us, all members of our families. And I think we have to show it to our own children. Thank you.
I think to add to that, I mean, clearly, young people bring fresh and innovative skills that we never had. And I think that really complements some of the things that we can do. And Yvette, this was really interesting. I mean, the fact that we had to shift immediately to digital, spaces where some of us didn't even know how to operate Zoom effectively. It's a very good example of how the young women in our organization just got up and said, I'm going to teach you how to really do an effective Zoom session and how to use Zoom effectively. We do know that they have skills. And I think I remember when we had some young people who, and at Forward, we are very, very clear about, engaging diaspora, mentoring diaspora young women, and giving them the platform to really go out and to go out and represent us. And one young woman came and she said, normally you go as interns and all you do is do photocopy, but when you come to Forward, you actually go right into the stuff. And two of our young women who recently, came as interns, have actually got jobs at the UN. It's really amazing because you make sure that you give them the skills, but also they build on their skills and use their innovation. And if you don't give them the opportunity to see them as peers, it becomes very difficult for them to build that confidence. So I think it's really important that we create the platform to learn from young people, but also to give young people the space. Because at the end of the day, what we are doing now is, and that's one thing we didn't talk about, is succession planning. All of us need to realize that we need the young people to take over. But if you don't really walk through the ropes with them, how are they going to take over from us? It's very, very important that we learn from them and give them their way of doing things, which is different from ours, but it still works because we are not in the IT world. They aren't. So I really, really love the fact that we can really collaborate more with our young people. And you can see that they are not developing so many spaces around young people themselves to meet. That for me is a real positive link. And they bring us into their spaces when they need us. So yes, we should be there to support them, but recognize that it's their time and we need to give them all the support for them to grow and flourish.
Thanks. Thank you. Sophie, I know that you're about to close, so if I might just say something before you wrap up.
Sure.
I just want to say that for all the women and the colleagues that have joined this evening, some of you have been a part of my journey. And I want you to know that even if I haven't called your name and I haven't mentioned it, that you have contributed to my journey in such a meaningful way that I have learned something from each one of you. And I am very grateful that somehow God has made it that our paths have crossed. And so continue doing what you've been doing. Continue being there for others, and I hope that I too can continue being there for you in different ways. So thank you so much. I hope that you enjoy the book when you read it, and I'm available to speak on the issues if you want to organize your own conversations and your own spaces. Just let me know.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Amanda. What a lovely positive note to end on. And also living by those values that we've just talked about providing that solidarity, that sisterhood as well. So thank you, Amanda. But also thank you immensely to Afua, to Nana, and also to Sarah SPCK for helping to organize today's event. I think we can all agree that the conversation has been exceptionally rich and really heartfelt as well. So as Amanda mentioned, if you haven't already picked up a copy of the book, definitely make sure you do. It's available to purchase online through most reputable bookstores, but also you can purchase it directly from the publisher, SBCK, at the discounted price of £4.99 with the discount offer code BUTWHERE2, and that 2 is the number 2 as opposed to the word. And that offer is available until Monday, the 5th of October. So with that, I want to say thank you very much again for being with us this evening and look forward to seeing many of you soon. Take care.
And thank you so much, Sophie. Thank you. You've been a lovely and wonderful MC and host.
Oh, thank you very much, Amanda. Very, very blessed to be here. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.